A seemingly quiet moment within the British royal circle has sparked a wave of questions, and at the center of the discussion is Prince William, Queen Camilla's family, and the invisible rules that often surround life inside the palace. On the surface, this may look like another royal family story, but beneath it is a much more interesting question. What happens when someone connected to the royal household chooses a path that does not appear to fit the expectations surrounding the institution? That is where the controversy begins. Reports and online discussions have suggested tension surrounding Camilla's daughter, Laura Lopes, and the wider royal environment. But it is important to separate what is actually known from the dramatic interpretation that often spreads across social media. There is no reliable public evidence proving that Prince William personally confronted Laura in an explosive confrontation, nor is there clear confirmation of some of the more sensational claims circulating online. What can be discussed, however, is the unusual position occupied by members of the royal family and their extended relatives. They live under a level of public attention that most families will never experience. Every appearance, every decision, every relationship, and sometimes even the absence of a public appearance can become a subject of speculation. For someone like Laura Lopes, that attention can be particularly complicated. She is not a working senior royal, and she has historically maintained a much more private life than figures such as William, Catherine, or Camilla. That distinction matters because being related to monarchy does not automatically mean following the same public responsibilities as a working royal. Yet the public often expects everyone connected to the institution to behave according to one unified set of rules. This creates a fascinating contradiction. The monarchy is a public institution, but many of the people connected to it are still private individuals. William, meanwhile, occupies a very different position. As the Prince of Wales and the future king, his public role requires him to protect the credibility and stability of the institution he is expected to inherit. That does not mean he controls every decision made by his relatives. In fact, the boundaries between family relationships and official royal responsibilities can be extremely complicated. A relative may make a personal decision, while the public interprets that decision as something that reflects on the entire royal household. This is exactly why stories involving Camilla's family can quickly become controversial. Camilla herself became a central figure in the monarchy after her marriage to King Charles, but her children from her previous marriage have never occupied the same constitutional role as members of the immediate royal line. Laura and her brother Tom Parker Bowles have generally lived outside the core structure of official royal duties. That makes claims about palace orders especially important to examine carefully. The phrase sounds dramatic, but a royal institution does not operate simply through rumors posted online. Official duties, protocols, security arrangements, public engagements, and private family expectations are not necessarily the same thing. Without a credible source confirming a specific order, it would be misleading to present an alleged instruction as established fact. Still, the story raises an interesting issue about how the modern monarchy manages its extended family. The British royal family is no longer simply a collection of people appearing at ceremonies together. It is a complicated network of working royals, non-working relatives, spouses, children, former spouses, and private family members. Each group has different responsibilities and different relationships with the public. William has increasingly become associated with a more disciplined and carefully managed approach to his future role. His public image emphasizes duty, responsibility, stability, and the modernization of the monarchy. Because of that, audiences may naturally interpret any disagreement involving someone close to the royal circle as a clash between personal freedom and institutional expectations. But that interpretation should remain exactly that. An interpretation, unless stronger evidence emerges. What makes a situation so intriguing is not necessarily whether a dramatic confrontation actually happened. It is the question of where the boundaries of royal authority really end. Can the palace tell a private relative how to live? Can a family member make a controversial choice without being treated as a representative of the monarchy? And when public pressure becomes intense, who decides what should remain private? These questions become even more significant as William prepares for a future in which every action around him will be examined more closely. The monarchy survives not only through ceremonies and traditions, but also through public confidence. That means every story involving the royal household can become part of a much larger conversation about reputation and responsibility. At the same time, the people involved still have personal lives beyond the cameras. That tension between public expectation and private independence is one of the most fascinating aspects of the modern royal family. And perhaps that is why this particular controversy has attracted so much attention. The headline may suggest anger, rebellion, and palace outrage, but the reality may be considerably more complicated. Behind the dramatic claims is a family navigating very different roles, very different levels of public responsibility, and very different expectations. Before deciding who is right or wrong, it is worth asking what is confirmed, what is alleged, and what may simply be internet speculation. Because in the world of the British monarchy, the difference between those three things can completely change the story. The deeper the story is examined, the more complicated the situation becomes. Because the real issue may not be a single disagreement at all. It may be about the invisible line between royal duty and private family life. For decades, the British monarchy has operated under an unusual system in which some members of the family carry official responsibilities, while others remain private citizens. From the outside, however, those distinctions are not always obvious. When a person is connected to a senior royal, the public may automatically assume that their behavior must also follow palace expectations. But that assumption can create an enormous amount of pressure, especially for relatives who never asked to become public figures. This is particularly relevant when discussing members of Queen Camilla's family. Laura Lopes has never occupied the same official position as Prince William, and that difference cannot simply be ignored because her mother is now queen. Her life, career, family, and personal decisions exist largely outside the formal machinery of the monarchy. Yet, whenever her name appears in a royal controversy, those private boundaries can suddenly disappear. A small event can become a headline. A photograph can become a theory. A decision can be transformed into an alleged rebellion. And before long, social media can make an unconfirmed story appear much more established than it really is. This is where Prince William's position becomes especially interesting. William is not simply another member of the royal family. His future is tied directly to the survival and reputation of the institution. Every generation of the monarchy faces pressure to adapt, but William is preparing to inherit a system that is under constant public scrutiny. He therefore has an obvious interest in maintaining discipline, consistency, and public confidence. But that does not mean every person around him can be expected to behave according to his standards. The difference between leadership and control is important. A future king can have strong opinions about the direction of the monarchy without having authority over the private lives of every relative. That distinction often disappears in sensational online narratives. A reported disagreement can quickly become William furious. A private family decision can become palace orders ignored. And a simple difference of opinion can be presented as a major royal crisis. The language is powerful because it creates a clear story with heroes, villains, and conflict. Real family relationships are rarely that simple. There is also another layer to consider. Queen Camilla's position within the modern monarchy. Camilla entered royal life under enormous public attention and spent years navigating intense scrutiny before and after becoming Charles's wife. Her children, however, were not raised as working members of the royal family. They have generally maintained their own identities and careers while remaining connected to monarchy through their mother. That arrangement reflects an important feature of the modern royal household. Not every relative is expected to become a public servant of the crown. Some relatives attend major family occasions, some maintain a low profile, and some choose to remain almost entirely outside the royal spotlight. This creates flexibility, but it can also create confusion. The public may see a large family gathered at an important event and assume everyone present follows the same rules. In reality, their responsibilities can be dramatically different. That is why allegations of someone ignoring palace orders need be approached carefully. What exactly was the supposed order? Who issued it? Was it an official instruction, a private request, a security recommendation, or simply an expectation? Without those details, the phrase can easily become a sensational label rather than a factual description. And this is where viewers should be cautious. Royal stories attract enormous attention because they combine celebrity, tradition, wealth, family conflict, and institutional power. Those ingredients are perfect for online engagement. But engagement is not the same thing as evidence. A story can receive thousands of comments while still being based on an interpretation rather than a confirmed event. That does not mean every rumor is completely false. It means the audience should know where the facts end and speculation begins. In William's case, the stakes are particularly high because he represents the next generation of the monarchy. His public image has increasingly centered around responsibility and long-term preparation. As the future king, he is expected to understand that the institution depends on public trust. At the same time, modern audiences increasingly expect transparency, authenticity, and personal freedom. These expectations can collide. The monarchy wants stability, while individuals naturally want independence. The palace may value consistency, while private family members may value the freedom to make their own choices. Neither side automatically becomes the villain. This tension is likely to become even more important as the royal family continues to evolve. The future monarchy under William will probably involve difficult decisions about who works for the institution, who remains private, and how family members should interact with the public. The question is not simply whether someone followed a supposed palace instruction. The larger question is how far institutional expectations should reach into the lives of people who are connected to the monarchy but do not officially represent it. That question has no easy answer. Too much control can make private relatives feel trapped by a family institution they did not choose. Too little coordination could create confusion and potentially damage public perception. The challenge is finding the middle ground. And perhaps that is why this story continues to attract attention. Beneath the dramatic headlines is a much broader debate about power, privacy, responsibility, and the future of the British monarchy. Prince William represents an institution preparing for its next chapter. Camilla's family represents the reality that royal life extends beyond official titles and palace walls. Between those two worlds is a complicated space where personal decisions can suddenly become public controversy. Until credible evidence confirms a specific confrontation or official order, claims an explosive royal showdown should remain unverified. But the conversation itself reveals something important. People are increasingly interested not only in what the royals do publicly, but also in how the institution manages the boundaries between duty and personal freedom. And as William moves closer to the throne, those boundaries may become one of the biggest challenges he will have to navigate. As the controversy surrounding Prince William, Queen Camilla's family, and supposed palace expectations continues to attract attention, one thing becomes increasingly clear. The most important part of the story may not be the dramatic confrontation suggested by sensational headlines, but the larger question of trust. The British monarchy depends heavily on public confidence, and that confidence can be affected not only by official decisions but also by stories, rumors, and perceptions surrounding the people closest to the institution. In today's digital world, a single photograph or short social media post can generate thousands of reactions before anyone has had the opportunity to establish what actually happened. That creates a difficult environment for a family whose private lives are constantly examined by millions of people. Prince William understands this reality better than most. His future position means that almost every aspect of his public life will eventually be judged through the question of whether he can represent the monarchy effectively. His challenge is not simply to become king one day. It is to help define what the monarchy should look like when that day arrives. That means dealing with society that expects tradition, but also demands change. People want the royal family to preserve history, yet they also expect greater transparency and modern values. They want royal figures to behave responsibly, but they also criticize excessive control over personal lives. These conflicting expectations can create enormous pressure inside the institution. The situation involving Camilla's family, therefore, provides an interesting example of a much bigger problem. Where does the public role of the monarchy end, and where does ordinary family life begin? If a relative of a senior royal makes a personal decision, should that decision be judged as a reflection of the institution, or should the person be allowed to remain simply a private family member? There is a strong argument for privacy. Not every relative of a king, queen, prince, or princess should automatically be treated as an official representative of the crown. At the same time, the public may reasonably expect some level of awareness from people who repeatedly appear alongside senior royals. That is where the boundary becomes difficult. The monarchy operates through symbolism. Even people without official titles can become associated with the institution simply because of who they are related to. A photograph taken at a family event can place a private person in the same visual world as senior royals. From there, public assumptions can grow quickly. But assumptions are not evidence. This distinction is essential if viewers want to understand royal stories without becoming trapped by sensational narratives. The idea that Prince William was furious, that someone openly defied palace instructions, or that a major internal confrontation occurred may sound convincing in a headline, but such claims require reliable evidence before they can be presented as fact. Without that evidence, the responsible approach is to describe them as allegations or speculation. Doing so does not make the story less interesting. In fact, it can make the discussion more meaningful because it encourages viewers to consider why the rumor became so powerful in the first place. Perhaps people are fascinated because the royal family represents a world where personal relationships and public duties constantly collide. William's future role makes that collision even more significant. As he prepares for the throne, he will need to balance tradition with modernization, institutional discipline with family privacy, and public expectations with personal boundaries. Those challenges cannot be solved by simply controlling every person around him. The future of the monarchy will depend on communication, judgment, and the ability to understand when an issue requires a public response and when it should remain private. That may be one of the most important lessons hidden behind this controversy. The strongest royal institution is not necessarily the one that reacts dramatically to every rumor. It may be the one capable of remaining calm when speculation becomes intense. William's generation will inherit a monarchy living in a completely different media environment from previous generations. News no longer waits for newspapers or evening television. Stories spread instantly across social platforms, video channels, blogs, and online communities. A claim can become viral before anyone checks its origin. Once a narrative becomes popular, correcting it can be far more difficult than creating it. That means a royal family faces a new kind of challenge, managing not only events but perceptions. And perceptions can sometimes become more powerful than facts. For Camilla and her family, this environment creates another difficult reality. Their connection to the monarchy guarantees a certain level of public interest, whether they actively seek it or not. Every appearance can generate commentary. Every absence can generate theories. Every family relationship can become part of a wider narrative. Yet privacy remains an important principle, particularly for relatives who are not working royals. This is why stories about alleged palace instructions should always be examined from multiple perspectives. Perhaps there was a genuine disagreement. Perhaps there was simply a private family conversation. Perhaps nothing significant happened at all, and the controversy grew because the internet connected unrelated details. At this stage, without stronger confirmation, all three possibilities must remain open. What viewers can say with greater confidence is that the modern monarchy is navigating an increasingly complicated relationship between public expectations and private life. Prince William's future will place him at the center of that challenge. His success will depend not only on ceremonies, speeches, and constitutional responsibilities, but also on how effectively he manages the human side of the institution. Royal families are still families. They experience disagreements, misunderstandings, difficult conversations, and different opinions just like everyone else. The difference is that their private moments can become global news. That is the extraordinary burden of royal life. So, rather than asking only whether Prince William was truly furious or whether Camilla's daughter deliberately ignored some palace instruction, perhaps the more important question is what this controversy tells us about the future of the monarchy. It tells us that audiences remain deeply interested in the private boundaries of royal life. It tells us that the public wants to understand who really has authority and who simply happens to be connected to the institution. And it tells us that sensational claims can spread quickly when they involve famous names, family tension, and the mysterious world of palace life. But responsible storytelling requires a clear distinction between what is documented and what is merely alleged. The truth may ultimately prove less dramatic than the headline. or new information could reveal that there was more behind the story than initially appeared. Until then, the most reasonable conclusion is not to declare a winner or a villain, but to recognize the complexity of the situation. Prince William is preparing for an extraordinary responsibility. Queen Camilla remains an important part of the current royal household. Her children maintain lives that are largely separate from official royal duties, and the public continues to watch every connection between them with enormous curiosity. The future of the monarchy may depend on whether it can maintain public trust while still allowing individuals within and around the institution to have private lives. That balance will not always be easy. There will be rumors, misunderstandings, controversial headlines, and moments that invite intense public debate. But perhaps the real strength of the monarchy will be measured by how it handles those moments. Not every disagreement needs to become a royal crisis. Not every rumor deserves to become a fact. And not every private family decision needs to be interpreted as an attack on the institution. As William moves toward the throne, the ability to understand that distinction could become one of his greatest tests. Because in the modern monarchy, power is no longer measured only by titles or tradition. It is also measured by credibility, restraint, and the ability to maintain trust when the entire world is watching.